We can still move our center of mass in a very compressed state, but understand that you're going to do it with a lot less relative motion. Good morning. Happy Thursday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand, and it is perfect.
So I have a client that has a little bit of anterior ankle pain, and he's a wide ISA and totally compressed. He does a toe touch, and there's almost no posterior any lift with the right, and so he's like pretty pushed forward. He's almost in that toe off position all day. His feet are ER'd, his femurs are ER'd, and everything.
Yep.
So we've been using cable chops, lateral lunges onto a ramp, and things like that to try to get a yielding strategy more on the right side because that's where the pain is.
Gotcha.
And I've noticed more ankle pain out of him as we increase sprint volume and intensity.
Sprint volume? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So we kind of sprint on a treadmill. He likes it, so we do it. It's that type of a thing.
Okay.
And so I layer in the cable chops and the lateral lunges, and all of our planks are now offset, trying to increase the turn into the right side.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if I'm on the right thought process. And like the way I retest things is with like a shoulder wall flexion test. And I've seen like marginal improvements, but I feel like the sprinting is interfering with the recapturing of range.
Entirely possible, because of where he's going to be landing. So when you sprint, you land at max P, right? Like it's right before max P, but we might as well just call it max P. So the heel is essentially off the ground. Sorry, the heel's essentially off the ground. The forefoot is going to be with first and fifth metatarsal contact, right? So it's the foot's still twisted, but you're at the stiffest connective tissue position, right? And so that makes it very, very difficult to move because you're creating the overcoming action within the tissue. So that's the release of energy. So the tissues are stiffer. If he is in a late propulsive representation, which is what it sounds like you're describing, right?
It's like so his toes do
exactly. So where you gotta move them all the way back. You gotta move them back to early first.
Okay.
So you get the yielding action back in the connective tissues themselves. Otherwise, you're just going to be battling stiffness.
Gotcha.
Okay. Then what you do is you move him forward through the propulsive cycle from early to middle in a reduced load manner.
Right.
So this would be a front foot elevated, right? So I want to tip him back to unweight the lead extremity and then teach him to translate the tibia over the foot. And that's what's going to get that's where you're going to get the dorsiflexion back, right? Because that's probably what he's missing is he can't dorsiflex because it hurts in the front of his ankle, right?
Right.
Yeah. So you have a late propulsive representation, which is an ER. You don't have an IR through the foot, right?
Right.
And then he's probably also going to have a similar representation on up, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to take him through the whole thing. What you're also going to have to do most likely though, is you're going to have to drive the delay strategy in the upper thorax as well. Okay. Because chances are you're going to have to get ankle, pelvis, thorax, at least. Okay. Because if he's still driving himself forward in the thorax, you get too much weight bearing too quickly through the foot. Okay. So you basically just need to create the delay all the way up. Okay. A yielding strategy first, and then, like I said, move him through in a less weighted representation.
All right. So in terms of like biasing a certain movement towards a particular phase of gait with like whatever you're trying to recapture. So I guess like for the sake of this question, just saying like going after early propulsion, and like using like a heels elevated or like a full foot heels elevated goblet squat. I can see how the representation at like the tibia in terms of like how it's interacting with the foot resembles that early propulsion phase of gait.
Yeah.
Yes. Like my question is, how exactly does all of that like work its way up the chain in terms of getting those early propulsive mechanics at the pelvis and like the pelvic diaphragm to like get those expansive qualities?
How does it work? Okay, so now we're talking about like the strength of a stimulus, right? So how much heel elevation do you need to create the response farther up the system? Is there another way that you can promote a position like farther up in the thorax? Because you're right, like it may not be enough to just place the foot on the inclined platform to get the thorax to move backwards, right? Because we're talking about, and again, the way I always see this stuff is you look at this initial representation with ground contact. So you're right. It's like, it's really easy to see tibia relative to the foot, but what about the sacrum? What about moving that thorax back? So what is the representation that you have in mind when you're looking at the upper thorax? And you don't have to describe it. I'm just throwing it out there. It's like, how could you capture that? Like, where do I need to put the extremity to allow the yielding action to take place in the upper thorax? Sometimes you put people on the incline board there and they do it automatically, and sometimes they don't, right? So some of this is going to be your coach's eye as a representation of what you want to see. So typically you want to see that, and we can just generally say, I want to see that expansion in the dorsal rostral, right? I want to make sure that the scaps are not elevating as they move through the whatever activity that you're doing on the incline board. Okay. So how can you assure that you get the thorax position? You have to say, okay, where am I going to put these upper extremities? And you were using like a goblet?
Yeah, I use any number of things, but I guess for this conversation, yeah.
Okay. So if I hold a weight right here in this goblet position, okay, is the load over my center of gravity or in front of my center of gravity?
It's the load over in front of.
Awesome. What would be my natural reaction if there's a load in front of me that's pulling me down?
Move backwards.
I'm going to move backwards, right? So right away, I put the goblet here. So this is why we use heels elevated goblet squat, because it's anterior to my center of gravity, which means that I'm going to move away from that weight to maintain my center of gravity, right? So right away, I'm starting to create that yielding action, right? It's an early propulsive representation. Look where my arm is relative to my body as well. Right. This is why, like we talk about rack carries biasing you towards an ER strategy, right? So you're creating that here as well.
So at its core is like biasing a different phase of gait, just about like manipulating the center of mass relative to the extreme positions.
Okay. So can I answer your question with a question?
I figured you would.
So if I'm in an early propulsive representation, is my center of mass behind the foot?
Yes.
If I'm in middle propulsive, is my center of mass over the foot?
Yes.
If I'm in late propulsion, is my center of mass in front of my foot?
Yes.
So what's the answer to your question?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's all it is. But to do this, to create this manipulation of your center of mass, I need this relative motion available to do it comfortably and easily. We can still move our center of mass in a very compressed state, but understand that you're going to do it with a lot less relative motion. And that's important because higher force productions demand that we do that. So now you have to, you make the decision. It's like, what am I trying to chase? Am I trying to chase my relative motions? Okay, then I have to manipulate the center of mass in such a way that I don't give up the relative motion in the process. If I'm trying to improve somebody's force production, I have to teach them how to move their center of mass with less relative motion with the higher force output.
Gotcha. So someone who's really compressed and you're trying to give them, like, bring them back to early propulsion, doing that heels elevated just makes it easier for them to get their center of mass behind, which is why they might be able to descend more easily.
And there you go.